The iOS Zoom utility is used for enlarging the content on the device's screen. It should not be confused with the magnifier function, which takes advantage of the device's camera and allows it to be used in a similar way to a portable video magnifier. This video is recorded on July of 2021, showing the device running iOS version 14.7. Older and newer versions of the operating system will vary. There are a few ways of making things larger on an iPad or iPhone, and each of them have strengths and weaknesses. One of these is the pinch zoom gesture. This function is quite easy to use for most. Just pinching outwards to enlarge, drag with a single finger to pan the view, and pinch inward to zoom back out. The issue with pinch zoom is that it only works in a few places, such as incoming email messages, web pages, maps, and images. Most apps and the iOS interface itself will not respond to the pinch gestures. Here's a demo of the pinch zoom feature. I take two fingers and pinch outwards to zoom in, drag with a single finger, up or down, left or right, and then pinch outwards to zoom back out. The larger text feature is another way to make some items, notably some text, larger on screen. This feature has an option to turn on larger accessibility sizes. The larger accessibility sizes feature can be problematic because it allows text to be made too large relative to other unaffected text and other items. It has no effect in many areas of the device. It also causes problems for voiceover users. We'll go to Settings, to Accessibility, to Display and Text Size, to larger text, and larger accessibility sizes should be left off. The advantage of the zoom feature over the other methods is that it allows everything on the device to be enlarged equally and with great flexibility. The disadvantage is that it requires more skill and dexterity to use than the other methods. We will look at two zoom setup and use scenarios. I'll note that the zoom feature has a lot of options, too many for every aspect to be covered in this video. To set up for scenario 1, let's go to Settings, Accessibility, and Zoom. Ensure that Follow Focus is on. Smart typing can be set to on or off depending on the user's preference and dexterity. Finer dexterity is required to use the keyboard with this function turned off, but better vision is required to use it with the function turned on. The zoom controller should be set to off. The zoom region should be set to full screen zoom. Zoom filter should be set to none in most cases, or can be adjusted to the user's preference. The maximum zoom level slider should be set lower for physically smaller devices like a smaller iPhone, somewhere around 4 times, and can be set higher, perhaps 8 times, for a large iPad Pro like this one. The maximum zoom level should also not be set much higher than the maximum amount needed for the person to read text. Experiment to find this level. Lastly, turn on the zoom switch. If your device goes into a zoom window where the full screen is not used for the magnified view, do a quick 3-finger double tap on the screen, which is the gesture to turn zoom on and off, and you'll find the zoom region option has reverted to window zoom. Set it back to full screen zoom, do another 3-finger double tap, and you should find that your device is now responding properly. That's a bit of a bug that affects some devices running older versions of the operating system. So if this weren't in full screen mode right now, although this iPad is, we would do a 3-finger double tap to get out of the zoom and then check that the zoom region hadn't reverted back to something other than full screen. We would reset to full screen and then 3-finger double tap to get back in, and all should be well at that point. Now let's have a look how to use Zoom as it's been set up here. Go to your home screen. We will use it as a demo area for now. Do a quick 3-finger double tap to zoom in. Another 3-finger double tap turns zoom off. The 3-finger taps must be quite rapid, and all 3 fingers must land at the same time on both the taps. If the gesture is not executed correctly, you will find that instead of zooming, you might inadvertently launch an app, or nothing at all will happen. Return to your home screen and keep trying the gesture until it works consistently. Also, having long fingernails and having an iPad on an angled stand can make this already difficult gesture even harder to execute. Now, while zoomed in, drag in any direction with 3 fingers to pan the zoomed view. As you work at this, notice that flicking with 3 fingers moves the view very rapidly. This can be quite helpful if a rapid pan to a different screen area is desired, but it can also be disorientating for the user and inadvertently move the desired content off screen. By placing the fingers, shifting, and then lifting straight up, the pan can be done in a controlled manner, which makes reading possible. For many, this distinction takes some practice. Here's a controlled pan. Put my fingers down, move and lift. Down, move and lift. Down, move and lift. Down, move and lift. Practiced Zoom users can combine rapid panning with controlled panning to read quite effectively. Controlled panning to move along a line of text, and then a rapid pan back to the start of the line. Lastly, the zoom amount can be changed by first zooming in, then do another 3-finger double tap, but on the second tap, leave your fingers on the screen and subtly move them upwards or downwards to change the zoom amount. The maximum zoom available will be that you set the maximum zoom slider to during our setup. So if zoom were off, we would first turn it on. And then to change the amount, we're going to do another 3-finger double tap, keep our fingers on the second tap, and then push up. And to have a lower level of zoom, another 3-finger double tap and gently pull down with the 3 fingers on the second tap. Here, I should note that any type of movement that was possible on screen before zooming still works while zoomed. This means that to use the device while zoomed, the user will need to realize that 2 types of on-screen movement might be needed to use the device effectively: zoom panning and whatever existing gesture that was needed at the time. For example, a single finger flick to the left moves to the next home screen. This works just the same whether zoomed or not. So here we are zoomed out, and a single finger flick to the left, we go to our second home screen and back. And if I zoom in, 3-finger double tap, I'll drag to the other edge of the screen, and once I hit the other edge, I can't go any further, but if I flick with a single finger, it still just does exactly the same thing as before we were zoomed in. Another example of this, in the Settings app this time. The long column on the left can be scrolled with a single finger up and down. And again, nothing changes when zoomed except for the fact that we are only seeing part of the screen at once. Here's our long column, single finger flick up or down. And if I zoom in and I scroll to the bottom of the column, or the bottom of the screen rather, I can now, even though I can't go any further with the zoomed panning, I can still scroll the column with a single finger. As mentioned, some people can have a very difficult time with these 3-finger gestures. Let's move on to the second setup and use scenario. We'll go to Settings, Accessibility, and Zoom again. With the zoom switch turned on, 3-finger double tap to zoom all the way out, if you're not already zoomed out. Scroll down and choose the Zoom Controller option. The Zoom Controller is a multi-use control that is highly configurable. I'm going to provide a setup that I have found effective for many people, but the controller can be set up lots of other ways. First, turn on the Show Controller switch. You'll notice that the zoom control has appeared on my screen in the lower right-hand corner. In Controller Actions, select Single Tap and set it to zoom in, zoom out. And then back out 1 level. Now touch the double tap option, and this can be set to Speak on Touch. And then back out 1 level. Now ensure that triple tap is set to None. Turn on the Adjust Zoom Level switch. Note that if the double tap is set to None, the Adjust Zoom Level gesture does not work. I think that this may be a bug. Set the idle opacity to 100% on larger devices like my iPad Pro. Smaller iPhones may require the opacity to be set at a lower value if the controller is blocking too much screen content. Now, go back to your home screen. Use of the Zoom controller can get a bit specific, as different ways of interacting with it can give different results, and the gestures involved can be a bit subtle. Touch the controller once to zoom in, and touch it again to zoom back out. When zoomed in, touch the controller again, and without pause, move the finger in any direction to start panning the view. A small box will appear that simulates the viewing area. This disappears after a second, but the panning function continues to work. So we'll turn the zoom on. And now I'll touch and immediately start panning with 1 finger. While zoomed in, if you instead put your finger on the controller, leave it there for about 2 seconds without moving, and then move it, this allows repositioning of the controller on the screen. The key difference is that upon putting a finger on the controller, immediately move the finger to pan, or pause for 2 seconds before moving to instead reposition the controller. So to reposition the controller, I'll touch and hold for 2 seconds, and then I can drag the controller anywhere I want on screen. Touch, touch, pause, and reposition. Instead, if I touch and immediately move, it starts panning. Now, zoom back out by touching the controller. While zoomed out, touch the controller and immediately drag it. This is how we reposition the controller, but only while zoomed out. Now, here's an alternate way to use the controller. While zoomed out, place a finger on the controller and leave it there. The view will zoom in. Without taking your finger off the controller, move it in various directions to pan the screen. When finished, take the finger off the controller and the view zooms out all on its own. This can work well for those who only need to zoom to locate an item on screen, but who otherwise don't require the feature much. So I'll touch and hold, and it zooms in, and I can continue moving around until I've found the item I'm after. And then when I have, I let go and the zoom goes away. Lastly, I'm going to go to Safari to demonstrate the text-to-speech function that we've set up in our Zoom controller. The reading gesture works in many other apps as well. Experiment to find where it does and does not work. So we'll go to Safari. So to activate the reading controller, I'll do a quick double tap on the controller itself and then touch a paragraph.
That scientists in 2 Australian states are moving away from that term in favor of more neutral language, like bytes, incidents, or negative encounters.
So to read another paragraph, I would need to then double tap the controller again and touch a different paragraph.
But Daley Engel, director of the Florida Tech Shark Conservation Lab, says we're long overdue for a language shift when it comes to the misunderstood ocean dwellers, which are at a greater risk from humans than vice versa.
Thanks for watching.